After my Bitcoin targets of 150 to 200k at the minimum are met this cycle, it will be followed by the greatest crash we've ever seen in crypto, where I can truly see Bitcoin revisit the lows of 20 to 30,000, perhaps even lower. Now, in this video, I will be explaining why these lows are possible and what I'll be doing to prepare for them, and why I think that proceeding these lows, we get a blow off top unlike ever before in crypto as well. In fact, you can argue that for my thesis, to get these lows and this type of crash, the only way that can happen is if we get a strong blow off top that is able to propel that type of spillover. In other words, you need a vertical blow off top to get a crash. If, for example, Bitcoin has locally topped 123k, it's quite unlikely that you then get a huge crash to follow it. But this is my thesis, and it has been for a long time personally, and I will be explaining in this video what my sort of 5-year plan is to play this to hopefully secure that very cringe term generational wealth. So let's now get into it. If you've been in crypto for even a little bit, you've probably heard of this idea called the crypto cycle. This is the idea of having a 4-year crypto cycle, where in this 4-year cycle, you get a bear and a bull market. A bear market bottom followed by a vertical parabolic advancement into a bull market top, which is then followed by another bottom, and so the process repeats. According to this idea, we are now in our 4th cycle, where the bottom occurred in 2022, and we are very close, in my opinion, to approaching the top. In fact, timing-wise, pretty soon. Now, evidently, as we've been talking about on this channel, I think we go a lot higher, so there's still a lot that's going to happen. Timing wise, there's not that much left, where we then, according to this idea, probably find another bottom yet again next year, Q4, to then start that next 4-year cycle. Now, I would argue that it was the 2017 top, this cycle, where this idea sort of really began. Before that, Bitcoin was quite illiquid, so it went up and down in extremely volatile fashion. But it was the 2017 cycle onward where things became a lot more sensible, where data became extractable, ideas, patterns, stuff like that. Exchanges, altcoins, you name it. And so we're now sort of in the 3rd iteration of that. This cycle idea is such a concrete pillar in learning what crypto is, and is what allows you to operate and build ideas on. If you start to question this 4-year cycle idea, which is what I'm doing now, then a lot of what we learned in crypto also becomes questionable. So I think a lot of people refrain from doing so. But I personally think that is a mistake. I think everything in crypto is subject to change. I think it's too young an industry. And so I, for one, want to question and challenge this 4-year cycle idea. One of the ideas is you make a new Bitcoin high every cycle. So every 4 years, it's occurred around the same time. That has happened yet again. Even though the current top is in Q3, I would bet that we get a new all-time high in Q4 as well. Another idea is that you don't make a new low compared to the previous low. So if now all of a sudden I'm saying that Bitcoin gets to 20-30k, all of a sudden I'm kind of challenging that idea. We've never come that close to the previous low ever. In fact, I'd even go ahead and say that based on my idea, which we'll get into detail in a second, we could even undercut the previous low. That is very taboo. That would pretty much flip all systems upside down if that happens. But here's my pitch, here's my idea. I think there is a real strong possibility that this whole time we have not been having 4-year cycles. And instead, we've been in one longer macro cycle where we've been making higher highs and higher lows along the way, where this decade-long cycle started from the base in 2016 and has been ongoing ever since. And what I'm arguing is that for us to get to those lower numbers, it is going to be the break of this parabola and essentially a reset, where after this reset and parabolic break, we come down, revisit inefficiency, and then start our next decade-long cycle after that. From a TA point of view, this checks out completely. It would shock the system, quite literally, but there are a couple of reasons I feel this way. So let's go through them. Here's the first reason I feel this way. This is the Dogecoin chart from last cycle. In 2021, we peaked and put in a huge wick at over 70 cents. And with the span of a couple weeks, it went from over 70 cents back down to 23. Dogecoin put in a blow-off top. Now, why was it that this candle was left like this? Why did this put in the ultimate top after a gross rise? Because this was a sell the news event. This very week, when it went down, Elon Musk was shilling Dogecoin heavily and was going to promote it on SNL. Leading up to that, it had a huge rise in price action, but when that SNL show finally went live, Dogecoin crumbled. That is what we call a sell the news event. It happens all the time. There's also buy the news events. For example, even this cycle with Bitcoin, we didn't know where the bottom was going to be down here. Mature, responsible investors figured we were close to a bottom, but a lot of people were still obsessed with nailing the absolute bottom. We were chopping sideways slowly, and then we put in a pretty fat candle to the downside. That candle pretty much ended up marking the bottom for this cycle. Well, that was a buy the news event. FTX had collapsed. It was complete chaos. That marked the bottom. A sell the news event typically happens when something is perceived as good. A buy the news event occurs when something is perceived as bad. I argue that if you look at Bitcoin at a super high time frame, this is the yearly chart, we could be undergoing what is a sell the news event. And that is due to the sheer amount of bullish stuff surrounding crypto. I'm talking Bitcoin ETFs, countries legalizing crypto, buying crypto, making it a part of the balance sheet, treasuries, pro-crypto presidents. Every single day it's something new. In fact, there's so much new bullish stuff every day that it's kind of annoying to keep up with. On paper, all of this should lead to very bullish price action. And people are concluding that it's because of these types of things that we may never get a bear market again. I argue that it's actually because of these things that we could be on the precipice of one of the worst bear markets ever. Now, I wasn't around at the time, but with these Bitcoin OG years in 2012, in 2013, the whole idea was that when countries start buying, when Bitcoin starts becoming legal, we're gonna sell. This was when Bitcoin was just a couple bucks, weird magic internet money. Lo and behold, that's now happened. And I would not be surprised if not on the weekly, not on the monthly, but on the yearly chart, it becomes the most obvious sell the news event ever, where if we do undergo this type of crash and then recovery, and people in the future look back and say, well, what caused that crash? Why did it happen? Well, that was when Bitcoin first became mainstream. So that's my first argument, that this is all just a sell the news event and not the bullish up only type of thing that some people seem to believe. Another reason I feel this way is because I feel that this could be, in the TA point of view, the fifth wave. Very simply, in Elliott wave theory, there's 5 waves in upward price action. The 1, the 3, and the 5 are all vertical pushes upward, where the 2 and the 4 are corrections. It's way more complicated than that. And I put this post on my Twitter a while ago. Make sure to go follow me there at Pain of Crypto. I'll leave a link in the description. I said the 5th of the 5th of the 5th of the 5th. The idea is that the second last 5th I put is this orange one here. That this final wave we're putting up is the 5th wave. But that the last 5th I put was that this whole thing itself was a 5 as well. That would be the purple. So the orange within itself, even though it also has 5, and we're saying that it's this cycle, well, the orange was just a 5th the whole time of this purple, which is the 5th from starting way back then. And this blue I had was the 5 of the orange, also has 5 waves. Just subdivisions and stuff, that doesn't matter. We'll focus on the purple. And the important thing is that once that 5th wave is complete, the thing we're calling a cycle, instead it was just the last impulse upward. Once that is complete, technically comes crash, the completion of that Elliott wave, where you then completely bust in a way. Now it's not that complicated to get ABC corrections, whatever. Ultimately, this whole play is done. And so you could go pretty low from wherever that tops. Also, let me ask you, zooming out, does this not just look like a parabola? It's a literal parabola. It's gone parabolic. Now, second question, do you think Bitcoin eventually gets to 500k a coin, a million a coin? I think that's the case. I think it gets there. We're quite far from those targets. Now, do you think we get there by following that 4-year cycle and continuing to follow it? To me, it kind of doesn't make sense. To me, price action like this, 4-year cycle, 4-year cycle, 4-year cycle, up to $1 million, there's no market that's ever worked like that. I mean, what makes more sense? This literal upward climb in price action over a 4-year span up to $1 million? Okay, maybe. Or was Bitcoin something the whole time a little different, where it goes up, comes down, and then it starts that base again? Now, it may sound crazy, right? For example, saying Bitcoin comes back down to like 20k, 10k. But you have to realize that for this parabola, topping at 123k so far, it started when Bitcoin was just a couple bucks back in 2016. Bitcoin was sub 1,000, and then it went on that parabola upward. I think that parabola is now finishing. We come down, we base out again, Bitcoin ranges, and now this time, instead of that base starting off at less than 1,000, we start off at something a lot more, 10, 20, 30,000. And that, in my opinion, is more than strong enough to start the next decade-long cycle up to 1,000,000 plus. So I'm not bearish on Bitcoin for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Not at all. I think we hit 1,000,000 within the next 10 years, but I don't think it's in the process that we think it'll be. I think it might be a little different. Now, you don't have to sit here and accept everything I've said. If your method is just to hodl until 1,000,000, it obviously does not matter how we get there. If you're someone who does not have a lot of capital, who does not have life-changing money, I think these nuances of how we get there actually end up mattering a lot. So let's now bring all of that back to this cycle and how I'm playing it with this knowledge. So going back to that original idea of this video, I don't think we visit those types of numbers unless we get a crazy blow off top, akin to 2017. A distributive finish like 2021 probably doesn't get us there. It still could. We'll see at the time, obviously. But here's what I will say. If Bitcoin, within the next 6 months, really accelerates upward to 150, 180, 200k plus, which my targets are, you will see super cycle narratives that this is going to keep going. But that is the exact type of finish to then cause this. That is actually a reason, a part of why I have conviction in Bitcoin finishing this way. That's why I've never called a top this entire cycle. That's why I stayed bullish on all these lows, because I think we get this type of finish. This is one of those reasons, and so far, it's helped me out a lot. Even this local top at 123k, we're at 113 right now. I could obviously end up being completely wrong, right? This could end up being something very different. Maybe Bitcoin has become correctly institutionalized and does nothing but chop and, a slow gradual upward growth, whatever that is. I guess that's also an option. We'll see how that goes. I have the word size here. I don't think this is the get rich cycle. I think this is the build size cycle. I think if you're someone who has 20, 30k, your goal is not to get rich this cycle. Your goal is to play this cycle correctly. Try to get that 20, 30, 40k that you have up to maybe 100 and 200k. It's not the most money in the world. You're not rich per se. But I think having that type of money and pairing it up with conviction for an idea like this, if it plans out, could then be leading into your get rich cycle. Having even 100k paired up with this knowledge and paired up obviously with this happening, because down here, everyone's going to say Bitcoin's dead. They're going to write it off completely. The 4-year cycle thing is broken. So it's not going to be easy. But this could be your once in a lifetime opportunity to accumulate and get 5 to 10 to 20 Bitcoin, even with a couple 100,000, 1, 2, 300,000, where eventually, like I said, Bitcoin is going to get to $1 million a coin. This could be literally your only chance to get that much Bitcoin. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are going to comment about the miners. Okay, fair enough. I think this type of collapse will also be the test that we need with miners. It's supposed to work, right? On paper, it is supposed to withstand any type of drawdown. You don't have to explain to me how many things are going to blow up and go wrong if this happens. I understand. On paper, Bitcoin should still survive. So for me, I'm doing the same thing. My goal this cycle is to get as much money as possible, where for the next cycle, I plan to buy as much cheap Bitcoin as possible, then start and basically buy the bottom of the next decade-long super cycle. Now, if you want to tag along, I have a Discord group. It is exclusive, but this is sort of my plan, how I will be playing it. My goal for this cycle is to help people make money, helping people buy Fartcoin at the lows, buy CRV at the lows, buy ETH at the lows, Hyperliquid at the lows. If these are the types of calls you want, even right now, Bitcoin is at 113k. A lot of questioning about what's going on. If you want someone to rely on to help you get through these types of situations, then check that out. There is a link in the description. There's also the Pain edition, where you get a one-on-one call with me and direct messaging, although be aware spots are limited. Make sure you're subscribed, as we'll continue providing updates on what's happening. And until next time, take care.